Let's talk about some classics. G'day to all you lovely people and welcome back to my channel. I'm Kathy and today I wanted to talk about classic books. I think for many of us who love reading, you try different genres when you're younger and then find the ones you like and tend to stick to them. Well, that's what I did anyway. I read, I think, every genre I could think of, and I found that fantasy was my favourite, as well as Stephen King and legal thrillers, just not John Grisham. And I always thought, I will get to those classics that I want to read at one point in time. And yet, as the years passed, I found I haven't read several of them. So last year, when I started reading a lot more than I have in many years, I thought, fine, it is time to tick off some of these classics from my bucket list. And I decided to share with you guys how I'm finding some of these classic books, reviewing them, talking about my experience with them. And if people like this kind of thing, then I might make this into a series at some point. What inspired me to create this video is that I finally read Frankenstein, and I wanted to talk about it. Now, I have several copies. I have been wanting to read this for many years, but I know I've mentioned this before. I find it very hard to read the books after I've seen a film or a TV show based on the book. So I kept putting it off and putting it off. But after buying this beautiful copy, and it really is, isn't it? I mean, look at it. It's just gorgeous. It is a leather flexi bound, they call them. It's not actually a hardcover. And when I first received it, I thought, I'm not so sure if I like this. I prefer hardcovers. But it does make it very easy to read and it's not very heavy. So I really like it. And seriously, it's beautiful, isn't it? And so is what was in the book. I loved it. Yeah, what a surprise. I honestly didn't think I'd be able to get into it, but I really loved it. It is so beautifully written. Mary Shelley was only 21 when she wrote this, and this came out in 1818, a very, very long time ago. But Shelley herself, she was very well educated. Her father was a philosopher and her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, I think, a feminist. And it's clear from reading this that Shelley was very well read and she had a real beautiful style of writing. Unlike a lot of the books today, the writing is much more dense. Sometimes you do have to take a bit of time to read a sentence. But the way she writes is just so beautiful. There is something to be said about some of these older writers. Their style of writing is so different to how books are written today or even 50 years ago. They wrote in a much more, I think, lyrical style. You can occasionally find books like that written by authors today, but the language they used back then is quite different to how we use it today. And this book is worth reading just for her writing. She was an extremely talented writer. I think it is one of the biggest charms of the book, let alone the actual book itself. And I think many people have the misconception that Shelley only ever wrote Frankenstein, and that's actually not true. She has written several novels, which I wasn't aware about until I started doing some research on her. Shelley herself did not have the easiest life. She lost several children. She was married to Shelley, who also drowned when they were young, so she had a difficult life. And considering she was 21, I can't believe she wrote something as beautiful as this book. But the thing that I loved the most about this, I think, is that it was not what I expected. Having seen many films based on this book, I had a preconceived notion what the story was about. And I was wrong, actually. And for those who don't know the story about Frankenstein, it is about a young man from a high-born family well educated, who is looking to make his mark on the world. And while studying at the university, he decides that he's going to see if he can create life as such. And as a result, he creates a creature who never really has a name, I don't think, throughout the book. That is the basic premise of the book. But when we start, we actually don't start with Frankenstein himself. We start with another young man who's also determined to make his mark on the world by exploring, I think it is the Antarctic. And it is whilst he is in his ship that has been locked by ice that he sees two men with sleds fleeing across the ice. He ends up rescuing one who is Frankenstein himself, who tells him his story. All the films I saw that were based on this book, it seemed that the emphasis was always on how Frankenstein created this creature. And yet, the book itself spends, I think, not even a page on that, because that is hardly important to this story. What is important is what led Frankenstein to deciding to create this creature and the ramifications of that. Many of the films portray the creature as somebody to be pitied, a very sympathetic person. Yeah, that was not my impression when reading this book, actually. In the book itself, Frankenstein is horrified at what he has made, at this monster, as he calls him, who is afraid he has let loose on the world. And this creature who comes into this world pretty much knowing nothing, like a newborn baby, discovers that he is not welcome in this world because he is not like other people. In fact, he is spurned by everyone, including his own maker, Frankenstein himself. I think that was meant to make us feel sorry for this creature, which you do. I think it's natural. This creature never had a choice as to whether he would be born or not, and yet due to no fault of his own, he is seen as a monster because he looks different to other people. However, any sympathy I had for this creature, he lost as time went by, because he decided, well, if this is how I'm going to be treated, then I'm not going to have any respect for human life. But this story isn't about the creature. It is much more about Frankenstein himself. This young, idealistic, ambitious man who wants to make his mark on the world, who wants to be remembered for something extraordinary, without having considered the consequences of that. And when he comes face to face with his own creation, he is so horrified that he can't deal with it and he runs away. And it takes him some time to realize that he is responsible for this creature, and it is up to him to ensure that this creature doesn't create any more havoc than he already has. But what this creature does to Frankenstein himself, it just breaks your heart. Like you broke Frankenstein's heart, I think. But what I took away from the book is that whilst there might be reasons why we may commit atrocious acts, it doesn't justify them. The creature may have been treated terribly by people, but that doesn't justify his consequent actions. I also took away from the book that people are so reluctant to accept anything or anyone who is different, as this creature was. Rather than getting to know him, talk to him, understand him, they judge him immediately by how he looks and make no effort to try to understand who this person is. I think that is very relevant today as well. And I think another theme of this was how ambition can lead to your own destruction. We can become ruthless, callous, careless in pursuit of our ambitions. And perhaps we need to think about just what we are willing to do to fulfill any of our ambitions. Perhaps one other theme in this book is why we are so determined to stand out, and yet when we do, we are not always accepted. Because ultimately, wanting to make your mark in the world, as the narrator of the book did, and Frankenstein himself, was so that they could stand out, to be different. And yet, the creature himself, who was different, simply by the way he looked, was not accepted. Perhaps ultimately what that is saying is that, sure, you can be different as long as you are like everyone else, but you can't be too different, because if you are, then you won't be accepted. Now, I'm not going to tell you how the book ends, and I've tried very carefully not to give out any spoilers, but what I will say is it differs quite substantially from most of the films that I've seen about this book. And I'm very glad I read it because I loved it. I just loved Shelley's writing, and I loved so many of the themes that she brought up in this book. It's also not a very long book. I think it's around 200 odd pages. I highly recommend Frankenstein if you haven't read it. It is well worth it. Don't be like me and hesitate because you think, oh, I already know this story. I think the book will surprise you. It certainly surprised me. Now, I have been wondering whether I should score Frankenstein or any of the other classics I wanted to talk about. Maybe I will. Okay. Frankenstein, I am going to give 8.5 out of 10, which is a very high score for me. And just so you know, I don't give anything a 10 because that is perfection and that does not exist as far as I'm concerned. If you have read Frankenstein, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on it and what you thought of the things that I brought up in this video. And you can let me know down in the comments, or you can contact me on Instagram. Well, that is all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope perhaps that I might have inspired somebody to pick up Frankenstein and see if they will love it as much as I did. Anyway, thank you all very much for hanging out with me. I really do appreciate it. And if you like this video, you can do the usual. You can like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, as it helps my channel to grow. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.